Welcome to the Product Podcast, where we dive deep into the real world challenges and victories of product managers, startup founders, and product teams. I'm your host, Lee Jean, and in each episode, we have authentic conversations that uncover the hidden stories shaping modern product management. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Galen Hughes, who's a former Microsoft product manager and current Japan Foundation Fellow. We have a really engaging and exciting discussion that I can't wait to show you. Hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Galen, thank you.
Lee,
Thank you so much for joining me on the Product Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. Can't
That's
complain.
that's good. Life is good, right?
Yeah. Well, life is life and on. I tell people that I don't have any problems, just like annoyances.
Yeah,
Like they're,
exactly.
because you get to see enough of the world and you run into people who have like problems. They've got like issues. It's like life is rough. And
That's
and
right.
and I have a warm place to sleep and food in my fridge, so I just have annoyances.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. It could always be worse. That's what I try to tell people as well. Exactly.
Certainly.
Exactly. So yeah, Galen, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. When we first met, we met at actually Techstars Startup Weekend. You were
Yeah.
actually one of the audience members, and I
Yep.
really
Yep.
appreciated the feedback that you gave me and my team. And we asked, we got to know each
Yeah.
other a little bit and found out that you're actually a product manager. So
Yes.
yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your journey into product management, maybe from the start up until where you're at today?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been quite a journey. I just went over this yesterday with someone else who wanted to get into product. So back in my undergraduate days, Microsoft had they had this discipline, and they used to call it program management. That means something different now. Like in the old documentation and stuff like that, as internal employees are talking about it, it used to be referred to as program management. But they would come to university, they'd come to campus, right? They come to Georgia Tech, and for the students, the poor, broke, hungry college students, it's like free pizza or it's like free food or something like that. So it's like, hey, you want to go to the event? It's like, whatever, there's food there. So let's go and, snag some. And so I heard about it at one of their info sessions, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting because it's like sort of programming is the natural application of studying a degree like computer science. But this product, which it will eventually turn into, is more about like why are we building what we want to build? Like you get enough talented engineers in a room, you can build anything that you want to, right? And so it's like given that sort of depth of talent, depth of pool, like what do you build? And more importantly, why are you building it? And so that was very appealing to me, and I sort of locked in there for after I heard that, and I was like, oh, that would be really cool to go do. So I reached out to or I got connected with the campus recruiter, and I remember keeping in contact with this recruiter like over the course of like a year, and
Mm.
like once a quarter, I would send her an email about like the cool things I was doing or like an update, just to sort of keep on her like radar.
Mm.
Um, and then that I remember got invited to another event that they did off campus. And so still talking and doing this sort of thing. And then that eventually led into going to another time they were on campus. And it was another event that I didn't even plan on going to, but I was there. I had my resume with me because at the time, of course, I had a printed resume with me at all times. And I handed it to one of my senpai, right? So one of my seniors who'd gone through my program, and she like jotted down like a note on the back of it, and I got a call like 2 or 3 days later. That call was for was that a was that a screen? Ooh, I'm not sure if that was if we had a screen interview or they. I think they did it on campus because they had so many like students, like they recruit often from that school, from
Mhm.
Georgia Tech. And I think it was just a call to schedule an in-person interview, but it was on campus, so it was real easy for them. So
Mhm.
I went in there and had a screening sort of interview for like an internship.
Nice. That's awesome, man. How is it like working for one of the world's largest companies?
Enlightening. Like in terms of like in terms of like an education or an introduction to the working world, I don't think I could have asked for a better sort of it's like a tutorial.
Okay.
I'm lacking for the word, but just the way business is conducted. Because like no matter, and this is something I've come to appreciate the more sort of experience I've gained. No matter what domain you're in, like the business of doing business is like flat, like it's across the board. It doesn't matter if it's tech business or
Hmm.
food and beverage business or paper bit, whatever. There's the business of doing business, and a lot of that translates across different industries.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's just like basic communication,
Yep.
talking with customers, um, sort of communicating up and down your chain of command, having one-on-ones, and just getting to observe how a Fortune 500 company, a very successful company, sort of runs itself, the internal workings.
Mm.
And that has served me well going and working, all over the place in all sorts of different roles and capacities because that's sort of at the highest level of like big business. But yeah, no, because I had done a internship before doing that Microsoft internship, but I mean it was like very different. The scale is different. When I went to go work, when I went to work there full time, I got access to the scale of working
Mm.
with customers across different time zones, flying out to meet customers, and sort of just actual opportunity to sort of flex those product skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you started your career off in a company that has so much structure, right? Like it's
Start off with
actually
yeah,
it must have been like really good for you with regards to obviously how business works and how different teams work together, right? Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the struggles you had early on, maybe adjusting from the college life to such a big company with so many
sure,
different
sure.
moving parts? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. And that was challenging for me. One, because I was just didn't know what I didn't know. And I was
Mm.
like there and I was showing up and I was asking questions and I was putting in effort, but I was still missing the mark. Um, the first patch was actually pretty rough because the so I'm going to take the long way around to answer your question. I think it's relevant and maybe interesting for the viewers. So during the internship, the understanding at the time, things have changed. This was back in 2015. But during the summer internship, there was a kind of an unspoken expectation that if the internship went well, you would be extended a full-time offer. And so halfway during that internship, you have a check-in, and it's like you either get the good check or you don't get the good check.
Mm.
And I did not have the good check.
Oh, oh
So I was
man.
like, oh no. And it wasn't for like a lack of effort or like not showing up because there were some interns who were kind of goofing off.
Mhm.
They were just not mature enough to handle sort of the flexibility of the working environment. And so that wasn't the case. I was putting in a lot of hours. I didn't do much that summer in Seattle outside of like on my Lenovo Carbon X1 or whatever, just like doing slides or whatever.
Right, right.
But yeah, I didn't have the good check and they had a structure with like a mentor and your manager. And so, I'm meeting with them regularly, but I'm just not getting what I need from them and they're not seeing what they want to see out of me. So there was
Mhm.
just this gap and I was like, well, this isn't working. What else can I do? And so reached out in the company internally to sort of my other intern friends who were close and got connected with a another organization in Microsoft. There's
Oh,
actually a sort of a, I guess they call them like affinity groups, something like that. But there's this one group at Microsoft, BAM, Blacks at Microsoft, and they held meetings for like career development and growth and sort of how to navigate your career and stuff. And I was like, well, let's go over and see what's going on. So, rock up to one of their meetings after work and I talked to someone more senior, who, has had like 2 or 3 years or maybe 4 or 5 years of experience at the company. I'm like, hey, this is my situation. Like I'm showing up, I'm working, but it's not working. Like just
mm,
something's not working out. And he sat down with me like maybe like a week later and just sort of gave me a game plan, gave me some rubrics, gave me some new tools that I could use and sort of how I approach my work and how I communicate about that work and was able to turn it around. But I don't think that would have happened if I didn't reach out for help, basically.
mm.
Like I had to take a different tact and clearly like I wasn't getting the my sort of track man my track history with managers has not been super fortuitous, but you know, I looked at the situation. It's like, okay, like what I'm doing now isn't working. I have a clear source of feedback. Um, I've been, talking with my mentor, talking with my manager, and like they're just not like maybe they're good at there's like a different skill of like being good at your job and being a good coach. And
Right.
like maybe there was just some love loss there in terms of
Mm.
like not having that like like sort of the inclination or the skill of coaching, right?
Yep.
It's sort of because it definitely felt like, hey, here's what we're doing, just figure it out type of thing. And it's like, I'm like, and this is a something that nothing that I had studied in school, completely brand new material in the world of like authentication and authorization. And so, yeah, I was like, man, this sucks.
Yeah. It
So
sounds like it.
I
Yeah.
just, yeah, and I was like, ah, and I just remember thinking that I was like, I will be okay not getting a return offer if I do everything that I can in my power to like sort of turn things around,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
And so one of those things that I had not, been thinking about before was attending the BAM meeting and talking to some more senior employees that were, this is important, outside of my direct organization, right? Because if I went and talked to people in my organization, in the larger identity organization, about, oh, like I'm struggling, I'm not really getting the support that I think I need, that may get back to like my mentor or my direct manager, and then they may feel some type of way about that.
Yep. Hmm.
So, for a large organization, just being aware of that and having someone, allies basically in the company that you can sort of turn to, is really important. And it was really helpful. So specifically, I took a very proactive approach. I'm always a fan of taking action, and got a rubric for a more structured like one-on-one. And so during
Mm.
the weekly one-on-ones, and then so I had this rubric. It had these set of questions, to sort of give structure to that because there just wasn't any structure there and there wasn't enough. So it's like, okay, here's a document now so we can facilitate a better conversation in these weekly one-on-ones. And then I sat down with my manager in using that document. Like the next one-on-one we had, I was like, hey, I am interested in, and being very frank with him, I'm interested in, getting a full-time offer. What do I need to do? How do we work together to make this happen? Type of thing.
Good. Yeah.
So,
That
and
action. Yep.
yeah. And so in my case, the learning was I just wasn't being vocal enough about the work I was doing, and I wasn't sharing it soon enough. And so and now we're wrapping around to that first question you asked about the transition between school and work. And so in school, you hold on to your stuff, you work on it, you polish it, you polish it, you polish it, and then you have this deadline. And so you try to get it as polished as you can before the deadline. Then you have to submit it, and then you submit it.
Mm.
But in the workplace, it pays to have feedback early, and pays to have like feedback on like rough work, actually, things
Yeah.
that you may not even think are ready to share. Specifically because as a product manager, you want input from a lot of people. You want input from your engineers, you want input from your designers, you want input from your product management team.
Mhm.
And sort of like there is this idea of sort of fidelity of like sharing your work at different degrees of fidelity will engender certain types of feedback. It also helps it feel more like a dialogue, and it's more important to have the conversations and foster the shared understanding than it is to have this one specific artifact or document, because
That's
the
right.
document is just a means to an end. And like a lot of times, requirements will change, decisions are made, and then it's reflected in the product requirements document sort of after the fact,
Mm.
right? And so it's like the shifting the understanding of like what my core responsibilities actually were, which is weird because product, unlike design or engineering, we you can tell when a product manager is doing the things that they need to do and when they're not doing the things that they need to do. But there aren't a lot of tangible deliverables for an individual contributor as a product manager. And that is sort of tricky and sort of but that's the space of product management. And one of the
Mm.
reasons why I find it so interesting is dealing with that ambiguity.
Right. No, it sounds like it, man. There's, what you described with, obviously the corporate structure there and like getting feedback from
Mhm.
your managers and your teams and all that. It seems like there's a lot of parallel with building product as well, right? Like you say, you need the feedback from all those other teams, but we also need it from customers, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did you feel about, I guess, learning those soft skills of dealing with those team dynamics and how that kind of translates into the product team and building product?
I'm going to try to rephrase the question, make sure I understood. So like how the parallels between like building products, for customers to solve a problem, to solve a need, a customer
Mhm.
need, and sort of how that process parallels the internal workings, the internal structures of like how
Yeah,
products are
exactly.
built,
How are
sort of
you
the meta
dealing?
layer. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean that's a great question. So that's actually I sort of envision it as a product manager, once you are become like sort of the senior level and above, and now you are managing other product managers,
Hmm.
your team of product managers becomes your product.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like the same set of skills and approaches, but instead of like a physical product or a piece of software or like a feature or whatever, it is actual the team itself,
Mm.
and sort of how you get the team to um, align and on velocity, and that's going to depend a lot on what your specific domain is,
Mm.
like what you're dealing with, but sort of there's this that notion of a team, when a team is gelling together, where people are helping each other out, and the velocity of the overall team is greater, like greater than the sum of its individual parts,
Yep.
and sort of doing work in such a way to one, foster that, but then two, for the PMs that do report to you, one of your responsibilities, well, in a good company, if you're a good manager, one of your responsibilities is to foster and coach and grow the talent under you so that they
Mm.
can then make, I mean, that it helps you too, right? So it's like if you're more senior, that means all that means is that you're able to make better decisions, and you're able to make better decisions because you've seen more, you have more experience, and you've had more cycles to sort of reflect on those experiences. And so by teaching people who are junior to you, and sort of teaching is not quite the right word, it's like advising. Because you don't want to
Mm,
give like whenever you're in a teaching scenario, you don't want to just give someone the answer, right? There's an art to asking good questions and sort of prompting more sort of critical thought processes, helping that person become more reflective on their own thought process and helping sort of guide them in the right direction where they are developing their own sense of decision making. Because a
right.
lot of it is just decision making.
Mm,
Especially, that's true of a lot of things, but as I would say especially of product.
yep. Absolutely. Yeah, eliciting is huge, man. It's like you already have this knowledge, you already have this experience. The best leaders, the best teachers, the best mentors, managers, they're able to get it out of them, right? By asking those right questions
I
and
mean,
putting them in those situations. Yep.
that is actually I want to put a store on that. If you're early in your career and you're hearing me yap about product management, like who is this washed guy? Um, I would highly encourage you to find a good coach early on. I
Mhm.
mean, it's at every level of the of 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 your journey in your career, your relationship with your direct manager is everything. And
Mm.
I had thought that for a while, and then I was talking to an old colleague actually the other day. He's at Google now. He's a PM for the Google Meet.
Okay.
And he was like, no, yeah, it's everything. And so he just reaffirmed that my suspicion. And so that's doubly true if you're early on in your career because you don't have any bad habits yet. You're soaking up a lot. You're sort of building your foundation, and you want to optimize for managers who hold coaching and upskilling and upleveling like as a value. Because if that
Yeah.
manager then of themselves, if they don't have that as a value, like it's not going to come through because it's just not, unfortunately, for most managers, it's not like a requirement. Like they're kind of able to skate by without, maybe less scrutiny and
Mhm.
they're but also I would argue that their sort of systems for feedback are less clear as well.
Yes.
Like it's like, it's not to put it all on them, but and my own personal experience, I've had lots of managers. I think there's probably like out of the 4 or 5 managers that I've had, I think there's only one that I think is like, oh,
Yeah. Well, well, also you got to think about this, especially in a corporate structure like Microsoft or any other large
Mhm.
organization, right? There are people moving up and down all the time, especially trying to get to the next level. So a
Sure.
lot of managers don't actually have an incentive to teach those underneath them, right? Because, right?
Yes, unfortunately, if the incentive structure is set up well, that as your work as a manager, your direct reports performance is a direct reflection on your skills. And so
Yeah.
that's actually how the structure was at Microsoft. So like the incentive was there. Like the better that your team is performing is a direct reflection on you and part of your sort of
Mhm.
compensation evaluation, all that. So it's tied in there.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah, still, it's just like it's also
still.
also like in it's also personal like knowledge and expertise as well. Do you have anything to offer, right? Like in terms of that expertise, probably in communication skills. Sometimes people don't know how to communicate what they know in their head to somebody else, right? That's huge.
There there's definitely communication styles and like people communicate in a different way and there's a lot of uh there are a lot of unfortunate assumptions that are made in the working world. I
100%.
think that a lot of people and not just the working world, but a lot of people insist on communicating in the way that they communicate, and the way they communicate is right and proper and just, and everyone else is like stupid and they don't know what's up and they're just bad at communicating. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Very rarely do I have I run into people who maybe take a attack back and be like, well, how's my partner communicating? Let me match them. Let me meet them where they're at.
Right.
And that's how I approach a lot of my communication, and it has been very it's a very simple thing.
It's a
And
skill, man. It's a
but I
skill.
guess I guess I've been doing it for a while, but that one question is sort of like, and even working with my managers and sort of like no matter what discussion we're having, I always try to envision what does this person care about.
Mm,
And so it's like my manager is going to care something about something different than sort of my developer lead. Or my
right.
engineer is going to care about something else, rather than what I care about. And sort of like that should be obvious. But I think people don't just take a beat to sort of acknowledge that, or maybe they get really stressed and they get really overwhelmed and they're like, I don't have time to or bandwidth to worry about that. But it's like, no, like this is going to make your life easier in the long run.
Exactly. I
Like
agree.
it's like I'm actually like being lazy. Like thinking about what the other person wants is going to get me what I want faster.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
So
That's all about empathy, man, and
yeah,
understanding the people that you're
it's
working
it's
with.
yeah, it's empathy.
Empathy.
So
Empathy. Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
So like in terms of like those skills, like empathy, obviously communication skills, right?
true.
Those type things. What do you think is, I guess, the most important skill for a product manager to do their job effectively?
I'm conflicted.
Huh.
Like the because there are a bunch of skills, right? It's a multifaceted discipline, which is again what makes it so interesting. There are two that I have to I'm going to kind of squeeze in and not answer your question.
Okay.
Um, like communication is sort of the obvious one that
Hmm.
comes to mind, and sort of empathy being part of being a good communicator.
Yep.
Active listening, like really listening to what the person is saying. Follow-up questions. Did I answer your question? Like I, as someone who asks a lot of questions, I hate when someone doesn't answer my question. And so when someone asks me a question, I want to make sure to do my best to actually address that question that they've asked.
Mhm.
So in that you can ask that explicitly after, did I answer your question, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I would say that that is communication is just the means, it's like a tool that you use to resolve ambiguity, and your comfort of dealing with ambiguity is somehow the most important thing for you to do as a product manager. So it's like
Cool.
go into the ambiguity and and drive clarity around that ambiguity, and even better, bring people into that space with a structure so that you can find that clarity together. Because then it's not you telling people, I've gone into the dark forest and the dark woods and I've carved this beautiful path for you.
Right.
It's like, because smart people don't want to be told what to do.
Right.
Like nobody wants and you're working with smart people, engineers and designers and talented people. And so giving some structure to that is useful so you can have a pointed conversation, so you're not just sort of flailing around in the dark. But if you're able to uncover that together, then later you don't have to convince your stakeholders that this is a good idea because they were with you in that process of discovery.
Right.
And so that's why I do place sort of like ambiguity is a weird thing to say as a skill. I'm lacking the
I
the
think
words to capture it,
I
but
think what you're maybe trying to say is adaptability, like being adaptable, or
yeah, I mean that's certainly part of it, but it's just like a lot of the work in product management, like you're dealing with a lot of ambiguity. And like the further you go up in the organization, the more and more ambiguous your problem spaces are.
Mm,
And so getting in there and defining the problem and asking really good questions is sort of what I would say is the most important part. So it's like confronting that ambiguity. They also call it like grokking the space is like another way of referring to it. But I would say your comfort and adaptability certainly is part of that. But it's like there are a lot of things where it's like you're told to like, hey, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go, make it happen.
Right.
And that's like,
Yeah.
you're just
Uh,
like, oh, what do I do? And so like
exactly.
being in that space, being comfortable with that space, and then being able to make progress in that space without any clear direction, and sort of crafting that direction like initially by yourself, but then also incorporating the stakeholders into your vision, into this direction to execute on a vision that you have co-created.
Well, it sounds like the ambiguity that you're talking about is a lot of what startup founders go through, like
Yes.
entrepreneurs go through, right?
Yes. 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 Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up. Um, Being a product manager at of a large enough product is like being a small CEO.
Mm.
It's very limited in scope. They're like you don't have to worry about payroll and taxes, but like I had conversations with legal, I had conversations with PR. I had to go over and talk to the Windows team, so a partner team that not directly sitting on the identity org, but they were like across campus, and I had to go and convince them to do work for me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Nice, nice.
so there's a whole sort of gear up and strategy and approach to that as well. Um, and so and then of course, talking to customers, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of parallels, and I think if you you did want to be a startup like founder, and that was sort of your path, getting like 2 or 3 years experience first as a product manager is sort of the best training you can have for that because
Mm.
there's a lot of things that overlap. That adaptability, being able to pivot, is sort of crucial for that, and you are responsible at the end of the day for the success or failure of that product.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing that now by interviewing so many different product managers,
Mm,
right? And it's like you guys go through, the business side, the technical side. You're in the middle, and you kind of have to talk
yeah.
to each side and make things work, right?
Yes.
I find it a super interesting position. I didn't even know about it until a year ago. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
PM? I thought that was project manager. No, we have product managers that
Yeah.
kind of
It
like the captain of the ship, you know?
Dude, it's very telling, I think, of the role itself that
Yep.
the name that we use to define it is not really good at telling you what it's about. Like
Mhm.
it's just very poetic or ironic or whatever it is. But like because it has the word management in there, and you think that management, it gives that impression
Businessy.
of sort of like classical management,
Yeah.
where you have like direct authority on people, but that you don't. You actually have no authority, especially if you're
Yeah.
an individual contributor. You have to convince people what you're doing and lead by influence.
Yeah, the whole convincing thing, that's sales right there, right?
Yeah.
It's sales
Yeah.
without having to actually sell something in terms of money, right? It's selling an idea,
That's
selling,
selling an idea, yeah.
reasons for that.
You're pitching,
Exactly.
you're pitching a little bit like they're already like on your team, and if you're co-located, you have easy access to them. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta convince them that this is a good idea. But also, I mean, um, yeah, I mean, convince them it's a good idea and get buy-in, right?
Mm.
Because things are going to change, and there's going to be other people who want to do different things to the product space that you directly own.
Mm.
And it's like I'm all for taking feedback, but you also have to be careful not to let the product suffer because of just sort of nonsense that comes up in the way. Like, because there's
Yeah.
just all sorts of um, nonsense that will come up in the way, and sort of defending the product and making sure that the product quality and the bar remains high is sort of your job as a product manager. So you may have to, on occasion, go to war
Yes, I heard
to
that.
that's what they call being the champion of the product, right? You're just out
Yeah.
there with a shield, just sort of protecting it from all of the
Influence, right?
things that are things that are not valuable, but things that will ultimately detract from the quality of the overall product.
Mm.
Because a lot of things want a lot of people want a lot of things from you, but as a product manager, but like wanting is free.
Yeah, exactly.
Like doing is doing cost and time and money. So we want to make sure that we're hedging our risk by using our frameworks and our decision making ability to minimize that as much as possible and deliver a great product at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Super, super important. It's obviously a learned skill. You have to learn that through going through all the madness, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure that it didn't come overnight. You must
No.
have had gone through a lot of challenges and things like that. Do you have any like particular like case studies or stories that you may have had where like you can share with the listeners about a particular situation where you had like so much going on and you had to fight through a bunch of BS to get, the product through or something like that?
I would say that sort of the first thing that comes to mind of sort of information that you're getting. So we had a get to production team. Love those guys. They're
Mm,
really active, very much go-getters. And so when companies and organizations would purchase our product, they'd purchase a license so that they could use the password reset feature
mm,
and sorry, self-service password reset feature,
mm,
and so even after organizations made the decision, and these are like large organizations, like, I mean, the ones that had get to production team members, like internal Microsoft employees assigned to them, were like large customers, like 100,000 employees or 50,000 employees plus type of large brand recognition. We want them to be successful, so we will send out an engineer from our org who's familiar with our product to help them actually implement it in their IT environment. Because after it's there are a lot of technical limitations and sort of considerations for large, older legacy organizations to sort of actually get the value from the product. So that's like
mm.
specific and painful to large organizations. And so in order to make ease that pain a little bit, they had members assigned to them. But aside from that, so I remember sitting at my desk at late one afternoon and getting a ping from a member of the Get to Production team, and they were telling me about an issue in the product. And it's like, oh my God, we got this issue in the product. We got to solve it now. It's like, oh, it's like world is on fire.
Right.
And as a product manager, there are lots of fires.
Yeah.
And for it's like a trope. There's this what is it called? What is it called? I think it's the animals of product management. Are you familiar with this?
No. No.
This is one of my favorite things. I think it's like I'll have to send you the link later. So yeah. Oh, dangerous animals of product management. It's on product board. Yeah, here it is. So there's one of these animals is wolf works on latest fire. And that was a lot of my experience. It's like people unfortunately a lot of people are motivated to get their work done and in order to make motion, they'll call fire. No, they'll call like nonsense a little
Ah,
bit. They'll sort of take something that is an issue, but make it seem bigger than what it is to actually
yes.
get motion on it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And
Like something's
so
urgent when it's not urgent. Yes.
yeah, and so it's like I can see where they're coming from, but it's also like not good. So that was a situation there where that I went and looked at this product and looked at the problem. I'm like, oh, this is a problem, but it's like it's only affecting this customer. It's not actually like throughout the whole service, like I was led to believe. And so this is an important and good feedback. And then now moving forward, whatever this person says moving forward, I'm going to be skeptical of them. And I
Right.
hated that feeling. I hated
Mm.
that feeling. I remember the feeling. It sucked. It sucked
I bet.
because it's like I don't want to doubt my coworkers,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right.
But yeah. So
They
that
do it too, man. Yeah, they do it too. Exactly.
it's like so that it's like having that discernment of like what is important and what's not important, and that people will do and use what's at their disposal to get done what they think is really important. And so having that ability of discernment as a product manager is really important. One of the metaphors I find helpful, and I mean this overlaps with the startup world, I think, a lot as well. But sort of you're juggling balls as a product manager. Some are rubber, so you drop them, they'll bounce back up. It's fine,
Hmm.
right? And some are glass,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And so like knowing the difference between the two is sort of where that discernment comes into play.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it takes a lot of experience, a lot of trials and tribulations to get to that point, but here you are today.
I mean, that's with any I feel like that's with any job or any
Yeah,
profession. It's like you can't avoid you can't avoid the nonsense, but you get to choose which flavor you want, right?
exactly. Exactly.
It's sort of so it's like and it's something that like when I taught to like the undergrads, my younger sort of kohai, if you will,
Mm,
um, of like n not doing something because it's like difficult or you don't think you're going to be able to do it, or it's going to be like those are not good reasons not to do something. Because like
right.
whatever you're going to do, you're going to run into some friction. So you
Yeah.
may as well do what you want to do and just figure it out.
Yes. I always heard the advice, do the hardest things first, right? If you do the hardest things first, everything
Oh,
else is easy, you know? I know
that's
it's hard, that's what leads to procrastination.
it's the I feel like it's the I've heard Tim Ferriss talk about it. But basically it's like you've got like a million things to do. What 10 things could I do that will make all of the rest of them easier, right? And
Yep.
so
Hmm.
if you find that, and that goes into sort of 80/20, and it's like what and that's like a good that's also a good skill set and mindset to have as a product manager, because there are a lot of things that you can do with the product. There are a lot of ways you could spend your time.
Hmm.
Like how could I spend my time if these things were done, what how much impact would that lead to? And sort of
Right.
framing that conversation around impact that you're having on the product and on the organization.
Mm. Yeah, it's key, the framing of everything, right? Whether it be problem solutions, all that is huge. Cool, man. I want to shift gears here and I want to
Yeah.
ask you about, obviously you're not with Microsoft anymore. What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so right now it's interesting. I have uh charted my own course. So I did Microsoft. I was there. I was like, this is cool. This is very useful, but like I want something more. And to me, when I was at Microsoft, it felt like a parking lot. Like,
Okay.
so what I mean by that is that a lot of people have, worked very hard to arrive at Microsoft, but once they are there, they are no longer interested in going anywhere else.
Yep.
And sort of like, and so that was never me. I don't think it ever will be me. And I just want like I want more. I want to grow. I want to yeah, I want to improve. If I'm not growing, like, what am I doing? And
Hmm.
so I decided to go and yeah, off the deep end. I went and did a startup for a little bit in Los Angeles. That was my the product actually was really good. It would have been really successful because this was 2017,
Hmm.
and it was like a remote based training, like physical training product for personal trainers, because the
Hmm.
co-founder had experience um, teaching kickboxing classes and all that, and had studios in Canada and whatnot. like pretty well established. But and this was, we would have had something out before COVID, and it would have blown up during COVID, no doubt. It was like
Right.
it would have just fit right in there.
Mhm.
But that fell apart because uh he just wasn't who he said he was. He just
Oh,
wasn't who he said he was. And he threw me under the bus. And I was like, man, because we were tight. And then I saw him do that to a senior developer that he was trying to finesse into getting him to do work for him for free.
oh no.
And I saw that and I'm like, man, this dude, like like even if I wanted to give him another chance, when his back is against the wall, he's just going to throw me under the bus again,
Yeah, I can trust.
right? As
Right.
I can't trust, I can't trust you. So, cut that. And then after that, I left like a bitter, like a little bit of bad aftertaste, I would say, in my mouth with
Hmm.
tech for a while. I went back to university, did a master's in Japanese. That
Nice.
brought me to Japan as a researcher, and went to a Japanese language school to learn how to talk about my specific research in Japanese, which was like really cool. That was in Yokohama,
Mhm.
right there in Minato Mirai.
Nice. Nice area. Love it.
It was gorgeous. And then that wrapped up, and I was um really enjoying my time and my work in academia, but I decided that against that, um because I don't want to be a professor or a long term. I'm like,
Hmm.
getting a PhD doesn't make sense. So
Hmm.
now I'm back in the work world. I'm doing some freelancing at the moment,
Okay.
just helping people with their IT stuff. And yeah, I've sort of, with the work I've been doing with these companies, I think I've identified an opportunity to scale a business.
Mm.
And so I'm going to approach one of my business partners about this and be like, hey, like, I think there's an opportunity here. If we have um, if we have 10 to 15 companies under management, servicing their IT needs, then that sort of pays for a salary for myself. And then
Right.
everything after that is profit. And the nice thing about this, and we'll see how this conversation goes. This is the Kashima-san, right? um, I think him and I can work together. But the reason that's I find this option sort of attractive is because, one, I want ownership at this point. Like, I want ownership in something,
Mm.
because ownership is like, I can scale the business and I directly benefit from that, right? If
100%.
I'm scaling like the way in which I work and sort of the intensity and focus in which I work, it just is very hard for me to do that for somebody else. Like,
Yep.
I'm not going to be like, oh, it's just not in my like DNA. Like,
Uh,
oh, I'm going to like work since I'm working for this other person, I'm only going to do like 75%. Like, it's not gonna happen. It's either like zero, like not at all, or like all the way, like we're invested,
I
right?
agree, man. I agree.
So
100%.
so it's like I might as well figure out how to do something like for myself, like that I can, have an ownership stake in, and then I can grow that and do that and do more interesting things down the road. But like, clearly, it's very funny. The product that I worked on at Microsoft is the same product that I'm using now. So I'm using that product. Um,
So, man,
as
you
as
see,
as as a freelancer, right? So it's wrapping around. Clearly, there's a demand here, and for these services. And even though we worked really hard to make this product accessible, it's still really hard to use.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
really hard to use.
It is.
So it's like, and I happen to have that sort of um, insider knowledge that makes it relatively easy for me to go and sort of solve these issues. But in terms of scaling a business, it's really attractive because, I mean, right now I'm the only one who can do that, but I can teach people what I know,
Yeah.
and then they can handle, some customers. And the only thing we need to get started is a computer. and
That's it.
there are no startup costs. So the costs are very, very low, right? It's like the margin has got to look like fantastic.
Mm. Yeah,
Is my
no.
So that's the idea. But I was going to go talk to him last week about this. We had a meeting, but he actually had to go to there was a death in the company. One of his employees' mothers passed away.
Oh no.
Yeah, they had a vigil in like Nagoya, I think
Okay.
Nagoya, Nagano, something
Unfortunate.
like that. So, but yeah,
Very unfortunate.
that's what that's sort of what I'm thinking of doing now because other than that, it's sort of like go work at like a Japanese company for like at minimum sort of like 3 years and like
Mm.
I'll have like some sort of salary or whatever, but like there's not really like a lot of room to grow, or if the room there is to grow, it'll be like 8 7 8 years later. And it's
Yeah. Yes.
why would I? It's just, and I've been thinking about this too, and as I'm talking to you out loud about it, it's making like less and less sense.
Yep. No,
It's
absolutely.
just
100%.
it's like I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it's good to have options. And if I wanted to do that, like I'm well situated to do that, but it's like why? Yeah.
Yep.
Um and then I can my idea is sort of grow that, have that as a business that I own part of. Uh,
Mm.
and then I can go and do other things. As we scale that business, that will allow me, and as I train people, I can sort of buy my time back, so to speak, so that can free me up to go work on other bigger things or things that I think are more interesting.
100%, man. At this stage in our careers, I think it's important to start building on our own, right? Because those companies are there,
Yeah.
right? There's less innovators than there are, people like us who are trying to build things on our own and ownership, right? It's a whole different ball game, right? In terms of
Yeah.
building product, it's your product 100%, your business 100%, right? That clear
Yeah.
transition from product management is going to really help you in entrepreneurship. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you build, man. Absolutely.
It's useful. Yeah, I am excited to build products again, and I actually have recently just started playing around and building stuff on my computer again. Like I've been
Uh-huh.
playing around with like iOS app. Like it's just as a hobby, just to like make stuff on the screen, and
Mm,
I've been getting back to it, and it felt like it feels like really, really good. Like I miss
excellent.
the for me, I guess one of the things I realized is like I really enjoy that process of creation, and it's
Yep.
what led me into product. And so it's like that's what I want to do. I want to make products. If I make good products and put them out there, then can make it like sustainable, basically.
Well, no, that's the one thing you said is creation, right?
Yeah.
I feel like creativity nowadays has been stifled so much, especially here in Japan, that just people would rather go the safe route and not create. Whereas you got to take some risks, you got to learn, you got to create things, put stuff out there, throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks, right?
Yeah.
That's why I have no
You know,
background in
yeah,
creation.
yeah,
That's why I'm doing this podcast to see what
right.
works.
Yeah, you know what I think it translates into sort of like Japanese people's on the whole sort of unwillingness or sort of shyness around speaking English, right?
Hmm.
It's it's I see it as like not wanting to make a mistake, not
Yep.
wanting to fail. And it's like that's the fastest way to learn. It's
Yes,
like
yes.
it's it's not it is painful, but I think I think it's sort of like, are you going to deal with that pain up front, or are you going to deal with it on the back end of like
Mm.
being unfulfilled or not going for what you want to do or not, or just not even trying? Like trying and failing is infinitely better than like never to have tried at all.
That's the real failure right there. And
Right?
yeah,
Like
that's a real
if
one.
you, yeah, because it's like, I will never take away anything away from anybody trying to do something. Like I see new content creators all the time, like on YouTube, and I like the video just because I like that they're creating. It's
Yep.
like 1% of the users who are actually like putting themselves out there, like making things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that it's natural to have like that fear of failure, and there's an aversion to it, right? It definitely, like when I say something silly in Japanese and like my friend's kid like corrects me, I definitely remember that.
Exactly,
It's
exactly, because it's
seared into
memorable, right? Exactly, 100%.
it's like
100%.
seared into my memory. But that's I think it's important to set expectations. Well, that's another, we didn't talk about that, but that would be another big
Another.
thing about product management is setting expectations.
Absolutely. Yes.
Uh,
100%, man.
but yeah, it's like having that expectation of like, okay, I'm going to try some new things. I want to do these things, and like just no expectations. The first thing I make, it might suck, but that's okay because I'm going to learn from that, incorporate those learnings, and I'm going to make something better the next time.
Yep.
And you just keep cycling on that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the agile process of like just,
Yeah.
constant learning, build, measure, learn, I think it is, the
Yeah.
feedback loop,
Yep.
right? We do that. If you do that through life, right? You'll learn even faster and get even further. So 100% agree, man. I couldn't agree more. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I mean, that's been a really great
Cool.
conversation. I want to, obviously we have a little tradition that we're building here. As
Sure.
the last guest
Yeah.
gives a question for you to ask,
All right.
sorry, to answer, and then you'll also give a question for the next one. So
Go.
the question is, how do you find a balance between pushing products early
Hmm.
versus spending time and resources to create a quality product?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
What is your advice for
This
that?
is this is like specifically true to like product people, like because
Yep.
product people kind of get like obsessed over the product, which is good. But it collides with sort of the real. This took, oh man, and it like collides with sort of the real world issues of like they were running a business. There is such a thing as good enough, and then we can improve later.
Mm,
I think that as a product manager, and this is where it differs from like craft.
mhm,
Craft is important in our field, and it's definitely good to have that sense with you, but the business element of the product is somehow more important than the product. And so in which is tough to say, but in the trade-off decisions of like of the product versus like new business you can acquire, new customers you can acquire, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times it makes sense to accommodate a customer if that means unblocking like 100,000 plus seats, right?
mm, mhm.
Um, and so I think that there's been the shift to sort of minimal lovable product, right? So
Okay.
instead of, we love our little acronyms, minimal viable products like
Right.
that. But there is something to be said about getting something out there and getting it out there early. And because in the same way that you're co-creating a path for this product with your product team, with your developers and with your designers, there is a bit of co-creation with your end users as well. And there's
Hmm.
real value in having and launching your service as an alpha release or a beta release. And sort of like it enables you to get real feedback and get real feedback quickly. And so getting to feedback quickly is sort of the gold standard. And so the
Mm.
faster you can get to real feedback from real people about your product, the better. Because it could be the shiniest turd in the box. But if it, you know what I mean?
Still a
Like
turd, right?
it's still a turd. It's got a lot of polish, but it's still
Yes.
a turd. And so um, there is no there's no good way to get that feedback and sort of head canon, no matter how much you think about it, outside of getting it out in front of real people and having them use it and getting feedback from them. And
Mm,
so what I would say is sort of like managing your own expectations and be like, okay, we're going to have these phases of release, and like maybe you have your minimal lovable product and this is your like alpha release. It's like we need to have, X, Y, and Z in this release, right? Because we're always iterating. Ideally, we're always iterating and trying to make our product better. And
Mm,
it's like we need like these components, or like it's not going to deliver on this core problem we're trying to solve. And so you sort of shave everything else away from that, and you just get that out there, and you get feedback from real people using your product. Maybe you do some usability studies, um, because that will undoubtedly shift the direction you're going to develop the product moving forward. And then maybe you have a beta release where you feel more confident that you've solved most of these problems, and you've addressed a lot of the feedback that you've got on how your user journeys are going, or like what text was like unclear, communicating to the user what they can and cannot do. Maybe this mental model we had didn't actually communicate successfully to the end user. And
mm,
then you have a set period of time for that as well, where you get more and more feedback before having sort of like a grand unveiling, if you will, where you're like,
right.
okay, here's our product. This is like what we think is really good. And even that release and sort of general availability, if you will, once it's out of beta, is not going to be perfect. There are going to be dings in it. There's going to be messy code behind there as well. And there's if you go and look at the code of these products that we use, a lot of them are sort of big balls of spaghetti.
Oh, really? Jeez.
It's rough. It's rough, and
Mm,
it goes against everything that you're sort of taught about in school, of like
right.
how to properly like build software. But at the end of the day, it works, and sort of the
Mm,
end users do not care about your how clean your code is and what the abstractions are,
right.
for better or worse. Like they just don't care. And so it's like at the point of the user, when they're using the product, what is their experience like? Everything else that isn't about that loses sort of priority, and it loses precedence. And so even if it's a hacky fix that you do, like a good example is like let's say you have an issue, and this is sort of what people do with live sites. If you've got a live service, it's up 24/7, and so you've got an engineer on call at all times, and they rotate through there. Um, Site goes down, there's an issue, people cannot use the service. It's
Mhm.
unaccessible. Like, what is it, the 500 error code, whatever.
Right.
And so the engineer is like, oh no, and like type very, very fast and going to push a hot fix. Just
Mhm.
fix it for the time being so that people can use it again. Right? Now, why that happened, or like why it failed, how it failed, what led to this failure, that's not the time for that conversation. You
Mhm.
have that conversation, do that root cause analysis after the fact,
Yeah.
like next week, once not on Saturday, not on Sunday, when you're back in the office, you can rally and look at like why did this failure happen, and then we can sort of address that cause and build a more robust fix,
Mm,
and push that out. And so sort of in that same way, like I would take that, it's like even though you care about the product a lot and the product is everything, you have to then sort of buttress that with the business value that you're delivering.
yeah.
And as you progress in your product journey, um, executing and sort of communicating that business value becomes more and more important. And like those are the conversations you have. They turn more into business conversations rather than sort of product conversations or technical conversations or marketing conversations. It becomes about the overall business impact that you're having.
Sounds like it. Yeah. And it sounds like, obviously you want to release and get feedback more and more, see how it's affecting the business. But then once you get all the learnings you can, then you spend some time on refining it and then,
Sure.
those type
Well,
of things to make it perfect.
here's another thing too. Unlike physical products, where you can put a lot of time and polish into, and you can appreciate it, with a physical product you can be done. You can be done and you can ship it, and then you don't have to touch it.
Mm,
But software does not work like that. We don't
that's
live in
right.
that. Things are always changing, and so like even if even if you had the time and resources to further polish a product from 80% to like 90%, depending on what other things are happening in your organization, it could or could not be worthwhile for you to put in that extra effort because it is going to be it's sort of like exponentially more effort to squeeze out that last 10%. And it's like,
Mm,
is that really going to make a difference?
that's right.
Um, when you compare that to maybe the other products that you have or helping out another part of the team or, switching focus to build out another product that supports the first product. So like knowing when to call it sort of good enough. And obviously, if you have unlimited time and resources, you would come and revisit it. But we
Right.
don't live in that world.
Not everybody has that. Exactly. Well, good. Yeah. Thanks for that very detailed answer. That was very, very great experience. Obviously, gave that answer. So thank you so much, man. Now for the next guest, if you have
Yes.
a question, please say
Yeah.
no. Yes.
Yeah. If you could do anything and you had no fear of failure, you knew you could not fail, just 100% confidence, what would you do and why?
It's a great question, man. And like you said, why is my favorite question. I always ask why for everything, especially here in Japan. I'm like, why is this way? Why? I think in America we're taught to actually say that from a very young age. So, yeah, exactly. Well, Galen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. This was a really insightful discussion. I learned a lot about product management through this, and I really appreciate you sharing it with everyone. If everyone wanted to contact you, get in touch with you, potentially reach out for you,
Yeah.
maybe for help with
Sure.
their technical stuff or
Yeah.
advice on product management, how can they get in touch with you?
The best at the moment would be to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like just send me like a little note, introduce yourself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and link your profile in the comments, sorry, the description below,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to do that. Again, thank you so much, Galen. I really
Fantastic.
appreciate your time, and
Thank
I
you
hope you
for
have a good
thank you for
one.
having me on. It was fun. Yeah, it was fun.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to share your PM stories, challenges, struggles, or insights with us on a future episode, please get in touch with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you on and keep this conversation going. Until next time, happy building, everyone.